Hello and welcome. You watching Insight on NewsX. I'm Neha Khanna. Our big focus tonight. In a huge victory for the security forces, one of the most wanted terrorists in Kashmir, top Lashkar-e-Taiba commander Abu Dujana was killed this morning in an encounter in South Kashmir's Pulwama district. Dujana, who was killed along with another Lashkar terrorist, had reportedly gone to meet his wife when the encounter began. So why is this killing so significant? Dujana, a Lashkar-e-Taiba divisional commander who had given security forces the slip 5 times before, figured on a list of most wanted terrorists compiled by the army in June this year. Described as an A++ category terrorist, Dujana carried a bounty of 10 lakh rupees on his head. Security forces believe he had masterminded several terror attacks on convoys of security forces on Jammu and Kashmir's highways, including the Pampore terror attack that killed 8 CRPF men last year. Dujana hailed from Pakistan and infiltrated into India in 2010. It is believed he even attended the funeral of Hizbul Mujahideen commander Burhan Wani in July last year. But even as security forces achieved this major victory by eliminating a most wanted terrorist, you had the unfortunate but by now all too familiar scenes playing out in the valley in the aftermath of the encounter. As soon as word about Dujana's killing spread, angry Kashmiri youth took to the streets in many parts of the valley, including Pulwama and Srinagar, and clashed with the security forces, pelting stones at them. The police and other security forces fired their rifles, pellet shotguns and tear gas canisters to disperse the stone-pelting mobs. In the process, one civilian was unfortunately killed after being hit by a bullet in his chest. Following violent clashes erupting in parts of the valley, most schools and other educational institutions were closed and the students hurriedly sent home in Srinagar and South Kashmir. Internet services too have been snapped in South Kashmir. The Jammu and Kashmir police have described the killing of Abu Dujana as good riddance to a nuisance. They added operations against terrorists will continue irrespective of civilian protests. They also said despite our repeated warnings and requests, often civilians try to disrupt the sensitive operations and end up getting killed or injured. The question we're asking tonight is, how much of an impact is Abu Dujana's killing likely to have on the ground situation in the Kashmir Valley, and with civilians coming out on the streets in large numbers almost routinely and attempting to disrupt sensitive anti-terror operations, not only jeopardizing the operations but also their own lives and those of security forces in the process. Just how should security forces deal with this growing challenge?
The martyrdom of our Jawans has been avenged today. After playing the game of hide and seek for the last 2 years, the Indian security forces got hold of the mastermind of 2015 Udhampur attacks that killed 2 of our BSF Jawans. Lashkar's Abu Dujana, who was on the hit list of the Indian Army, was killed in a joint operation today in the Pulwama district of Jammu and Kashmir.
दोनों बॉडीज रिकवर कर दी गई हैं, आइडेंटिफिकेशन हो गया है और एक AK-47 और एक पिस्टल और भारी मात्रा में एमुनिशन मिले हैं और एक ये बहुत बड़ी सक्सेस है सिक्योरिटी एजेंसीज के लिए.
While he was not into many major terrorist operations in the last few months, but before that he has been involved in a lot of operations against security agencies. And his killing will definitely ensure that the levels of recruitment in South Kashmir will come down slightly.
ये ऑपरेशन खत्म हुआ, now we'll be looking for others. So धीरे-धीरे the endeavor is to clean up the area.
Situation in most parts of the Kashmir Valley has suddenly turned tense after the killing of 2 Lashkar-e-Taiba militants. That includes the Kashmir commander of Lashkar-e-Taiba, Abu Dujana, along with his accomplice Arif Lelhar. After the encounter was over, there were intense clashes reported in that area.
From Burhan Wani to Abu Qasim and now Abu Dujana, the Indian Army has resolved to flush out terrorists from the valley. The big operatives are next on India's list, and our braves will smoke them out. With Arish Bilal from Srinagar, Bureau Report, NewsX.
All right, let's take a quick look at the big questions we're asking tonight. Another top Lashkar commander killed. Good riddance to a nuisance, as it's been described. One of the most wanted terrorists killed. What impact is this likely to have in Kashmir? Several top terrorists killed in the last 1 year. Can we hope for things to finally improve on the ground? Civilians, though, continue to disrupt anti-terror operations. How should the army deal with it? Let's take these questions straight across to our panel. I'm joined here in the studio by Major General Shashi Asthana, defense expert, Rahul Jalali, senior journalist and a Kashmir expert. Also here with me in the studio, Sudesh Verma, spokesperson for the BJP, and Tom Varakan, spokesperson for the Congress, joining us from the national capital. And we're also hoping to be joined in just a bit by Shabnam Lone, senior lawyer and Kashmir activist. All right, Major General Shashi Asthana, let me begin with you. Now, sir, let's take a look at some important statistics that we have. From January to July this year, 102 terrorists have been killed by the security forces in Kashmir. These are statistics of the Home Ministry. This is the highest number of terrorists killed in the valley in 7 years. Let's now take a look at the kind of terrorists who've been killed in the last 1 year. Some very high-profile one amongst most wanted. Burhan Wani in July 2016, Abu Bakr of the LeT in December last year, Sabzar Ahmad Bhatt, who had succeeded Burhan Wani in May 2017, Bashir Lashkari of the Lashkar-e-Taiba just last month, Azad Malik, and now Abu Dujana. So now, talking about today's killing, security forces have described Dujana's killing as a major success. He's been described as the mastermind of several terror attacks, especially on security forces. The question that arises is, sir, according to you, what impact is this likely to have on the ground?
See, first of all, let me use your channel to convey to the viewers is that I must compliment all the security forces for such a big success. Now, why I call this as a big success is, firstly, it's going to be a morale booster for all the security forces. Second is, this is the first time, or I would say in the recent times, we have seen that the synergy between the government, between the security agencies, between army, between paramilitary forces, has acted and acted substantially in a manner to reduce the terrorism and whole lot of terrorists. You read out the figures.
Yes.
Now, as per my figures, let me also tell you, 117 killed, and out of these 117, only 30 were local terrorists, and therefore you can see that they are number of foreign terrorists.
Correct.
Now, when we talk of the counter-terrorist operations, the population is supposed to be the center of gravity.
Correct.
And if there are so many, 70% or more than 70% are foreign terrorists, then you see what happens is the population and those also gets fed up with them.
Right.
They are also causing atrocities, but nobody speaks.
Okay.
You have been running this show for such a long time. You would have rarely seen a Kashmiri leader criticizing the terrorist killings.
In fact, today you had Farooq Abdullah congratulating the security forces, even though he's taken, a very controversial stand on such issues in the past. Today he congratulated the security forces.
So, I mean, this is a good change, and I would say pleasant change.
Okay.
So, if he follows it up,
okay,
because tomorrow he can say something else also.
So
and he has done it n number of times.
So what you're also saying is, sir, that apart from the fact that this is a major success for the security forces, you're actually talking about the role of political parties who often, unfortunately, are seen as indulging in divisive politics. You're saying this is a very, very difficult, undeclared war that the army and the security forces are fighting, and therefore we need a united political class backing them, rather than indulging in divisive politics, which is something that we have unfortunately seen many times in the past.
Yeah, but that is, you see, but good changes are coming. Okay. Now, why I say good changes are coming? You see, the government is cracking on the terror funders, and therefore, they've also done the demonetization took place. After demonetization, the stone pelting came down.
Yes.
You also know this is a terror industry. The fuel to this terror industry is money. All these stone pelters are paid. All the crowd organizers are paid.
Okay.
And therefore what happens is that if you reduce this fuel then you will find that automatically it has got a great impact in facilitating the operations.
Okay.
Now, the same terrorist which we are talking about, which we are discussing about,
Right.
this gentleman has escaped a number of times because of stone pelters.
That's true. He in fact managed to give security forces the slip 5 times. And so we will talk about the role of stone pelters. We'll come to that. It's a very important part of the debate in just a moment. What we witnessed even today as far as civilian protests are concerned. Mr. Jalali, if I could bring you in at this point. Now, you know, we were looking at this figure. More than 100 terrorists eliminated in Jammu and Kashmir this year from January to July alone. According to the Home Ministry figures, it's probably the highest number of terrorists eliminated since 2010, from Burhan Wani to Abu Dujana, some of the most wanted terrorists in Kashmir. So yes, these are important successes achieved by the security forces, but you know, many would also remind us of how we've unfortunately also witnessed more terror attacks in the last 1 year than in the past many years. And therefore, even though we'd like to look at it as a major step forward, you know, we all need to be very careful in not painting a rosy picture, because fact of the matter is that it is still a very, very challenging situation that the security forces continue to face on the ground.
Oh, well, that's true. I mean, like you pointed out, nearly 70% of the killings which have taken place in Kashmir of terrorists are people who have come from Pakistan. So let me also point out that across the LOC on the launching pads, every time the figure comes out, there are at least about 200 odd terrorists who are there all the time in the launching pad trying to sneak into India. And that's why you have that cross-border firing by Pakistan, which is essentially a manner in which to give them covering fire. But that apart, let me also put it that this is one of the most, a period when the security grid, especially in South Kashmir, is in place, which there was some lacuna last year when the stone pelting incident took place. But now it's in place. There have been changes at the top personnel. Also, let me tell you that what is important is the kind of information network which has started flowing, especially for Jammu Kashmir Police. That's why the strike rate is huge. I mean, you have Sabzar Ahmed, you have Abu Dujana now, you have Bashir Lashkar-e. In the last couple of months, you've had all these people who've been killed.
Right.
And also look at the numbers. I think the number has gone far beyond 102. It's far higher than that. So the hits which the army and the police and the other security forces have scored.
Okay.
So obviously the level of cooperation between these three is now quite good. But they're working together. So that is in place. The security grid, which is what it's called, is in place there.
All right.
Secondly, and also another point which you raised about stone pelters, I think the security grid, all the three personnel of the security establishment have also found some kind of a manner in which to take control of the stone pelters.
Okay.
Though today there was some pelting, etc., and Hurriyat Conference has given a call for a ban.
Yes.
Last time it didn't work with them when they gave a ban call on the question of NIA raids. Let's see what happens tomorrow.
Okay.
But the fact is that all the manner in which things went out of shape last year, out of hand, I don't think that's going to happen now.
Okay, so you are hopeful that things are perhaps going to be better going forward in Kashmir, though of course the valley has witnessed more violence in the last 1 year than over several years.
Well,
and
you've got Pakistan on the border. Look,
absolutely.
Let's not rule that out.
Exactly,
like I
exactly.
pointed out.
And therefore it continues to be a big challenge for security forces.
That challenge remains.
So the sense that I get from the two panelists is that they believe that we have a much stronger security grid in place, the intelligence gathering has improved, and as the General pointed out, that there is perhaps better synergy between the security forces than ever before, which is probably what has led to these massive successes that they've achieved in recent months. Let's now shift our focus to another very important aspect of this story. Shabnam Lone, I want to bring you into this. Yes, I'd love to know how you react to the fact that one of the most wanted terrorists in Kashmir has been eliminated by the security forces today. But more significantly, the question that I want to ask you is this. Isn't it extremely unfortunate, Shabnam Lone, that even as security forces were engaged in these very sensitive anti-terror operations in which they took out this man called Abu Dujana, you actually had civilians coming out on the streets, once again trying to disrupt those sensitive operations, and then soon after word of his killing spread, you had violent clashes erupting all over the valley. Now, the problem is, isn't this now a huge challenge for the security forces? You often accuse them of, not respecting human rights, indulging in excesses. But what are security forces expected to do when you have civilians trying to disrupt the anti-terror operations in order to shield terrorists? In fact, you had Munir Khan, Inspector General of Kashmir Police, saying in spite of our repeated warnings and requests, civilians try to disrupt encounters. That's how they get injured or killed. So yes, our heart does go out to the man who got killed today. But fact of the matter is that this is a very, very difficult situation for the security forces, only compounded by these protests.
Good question, Neha, and thank you. Today, thank you so much for showing your candid appreciation of the fact that somebody died in Kashmir and that you feel sad, because the entire Kashmir watches these programs. Now, let me again reiterate. I feel sometimes intellectually very desolate when I hear these ambivalent, ostrich-like political statements from everyone around. The fact is that we have a grave, grievous problem in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It is not a peaceful region. It is a valley on the edge. It is a valley on the boil. And it is getting compounded every day with more and more civilian deaths. I understand when you say what the army should do, what the security forces should do, when people come out in large numbers, when you have anti-terror operations. This is the problem. Army does not go for civilian mass protests. Army is normally trained to defend the borders, to defend the integrity of the country. Now, I don't know this Dujana, I don't know of him, and I don't know about him. Now, when our Kashmiri boys who are young get sucked into this vortex of terrorism, and they think that it is the only way out, that is where we as Kashmiris feel that we have to fight one thing. We want our young to choose life over death. We want our young to dream.
I agree with the larger point you're making, Shabnam
Loan.
I agree with the larger point that you're making, but I still need to ask you this follow-up question. Isn't it time for civilians to stop shielding terrorists, to stop disrupting anti-terror operations, because they are jeopardizing the lives of the security forces, they are jeopardizing their own lives in the process? Isn't this something that needs to stop? As a Kashmiri, would you not want to make an appeal to those young Kashmiri men and women who are perhaps being misled and who are, doing these sort of things in the valley, and then forcing the hand of the security forces, unfortunately?
You see, you have to be fair in your assessment. See, Kashmir is a voyage of discovery for many, and Kashmir has become a business for many. Didn't we have the elected constitutional head of this state, Mufti Muhammad Said? What did he do? He thanked Pakistan for a peaceful election. That should have been taken very seriously by the government of India. What message did it send?
But you're deflecting. You're deflecting my question, Shabnam Loan. You're deflecting my question.
I'm not deflecting.
Yes, that comment made by
deflecting.
Mufti Muhammad Saeed
That
did
was
stir
the
a
message.
controversy. But my point is, isn't it time for people like you to come forward and say that Kashmiri youth need to stop disrupting anti-terror operations, they need to stop shielding terrorists, they need to stop jeopardizing the lives of the security forces and their own? Why can't a loud and clear message be sent out by people like you?
I would do anything, Neha, I would do anything within my right to stop these deaths, to stop this blood shed, to stop this mayhem, but justice has to prevail, and my valley lacks justice. Discrimination should not prevail, and my valley is abundant in discrimination. That is what I am saying.
We understand the larger problem that exists in Kashmir, Shabnam Lone, but the problem is that people like you continue to be evasive on these issues, which we need to address head on.
Who were killed, for all those children who were blinded, what is the justice we gave them? Did we give them justice?
Shabnam Lone, as I said, our heart does go out to all those people who lost their lives, and we wish those lives, those precious lives, had never been lost. But at the same time, Shabnam Lone, you have to acknowledge.
I thank you.
You know, I understand what you're saying, and believe you me, there is nobody on this panel who would not agree with me when I say that I wish those unfortunate deaths had never happened. Those were our people. At the end of the day, yes, those were our people, but you also have to acknowledge, Shabnam Lone, how difficult a situation the security forces are confronted with. Okay, let me bring in Sudesh Verma. Let me bring in Sudesh Verma at this point. Mr. Verma, I'll ask you two quick questions. Firstly, how significant a success do you think Abu Dujana's killing is for the security forces? How much of an impact do you think it's likely to make going forward? Also respond to what Shabnam Lone is saying about the larger political problem of Kashmir, which of course still exists, and I don't think anybody can deny that.
Neha, we are very happy. We are happy at the success of security forces. We compliment the security forces and also the local police for having achieved this. But we want that they should not be letting off their guard, because now there will be an intensified fight from the terrorist camp, because they would be naturally frustrated. So the action which has started against terrorism, has to reach a logical conclusion. If terrorism has to end, this process has to reach a logical conclusion. You see, I do not agree with Shabnam Lone. 200 terrorists cannot define the narrative in Kashmir, out of which 100 have been decimated. If you take arms against the state, our security forces are not going to lie down and talk with you. If you want to talk, then you have to leave arms. Enough of bloodshed has happened. It's a war against terrorism.
That shows your lack of understanding, Mr. Sudesh Verma.
Peaceful
you
life.
do not
peaceful
understand
civilian
the
life.
Kashmir complex
Peaceful
conundrum.
Civilian life. We understand everything. We have seen enough. We have seen Punjab also.
I'm sorry.
We have
you
seen
don't
Punjab
understand
also.
it.
And Punjab
I'm sorry.
also became silent. Don't worry.
Kashmir
don't
is
worry.
not
We'll
Punjab.
give the solution.
Kashmir is
we'll
not
give
Punjab.
the solution. Don't worry.
No military
we'll
and gun
Pakistan.
solution will get
we will
you nowhere.
Okay.
We will decimate terrorists.
All right. My request to our panelists.
He will be there only if terrorists are decimated.
I would really
and
be.
Pakistan is dealt with.
Please,
with iron
if you
hand.
would decimate Pakistan, I would be happy.
All right. Tom
But can
Vadakan.
you do it?
Okay, Tom Vadakan has been
decimate
listening
the
impatiently.
That is destroying our lives.
Okay, Shabnam Lone, give me one
Our
second.
line
Tom
is very
Vadakan
clear.
hasn't spoken.
Anybody taking up arms, we are not going to spare.
Okay, Mr.
Anybody
Verma.
taking up arms.
Yes, you are echoing what the army chief said a few weeks ago, and I want to put that question to Tom Vadakan. Mr. Vadakan, firstly, your response to what has been described as a major success for the security forces today, the killing of this top Lashkar commander. Secondly, recently you had the army chief saying that even those who shield terrorists and who disrupt anti-terror operations will be considered as terrorists and no quarter will be given. Now that statement kicked up a row with many political parties criticizing him. Sandeep Dixit of your own party actually described the army chief as a sadak ka gunda. I know that comment was condemned by your party, but at the end of the day, sir, as many have pointed out, this is an undeclared war and the army does face a very, very difficult situation. And the civilian protests that we see, especially disruption of anti-terror operations, make it only tougher for them, right? Mr. Vadakan, can you hear me?
Neha.
Sir, could you hear my question?
Missed the last part of your question, Neha.
Okay.
Now, this is an issue which last part of your question was not clear.
Okay.
But from the general sense, I can understand what you must have meant. Now, let me be very candid. Security agencies have a job to do. Now, whether they neutralize A terrorist, B terrorist or C terrorist, that's a job they have to do in the national interest. Now, the larger interest of the valley I would only like to ask you a few questions. I am ignorant of what has happened. One is, I want to know what happened to the family of the DYSP who was lynched. Has there been any word, has there been any discussion over the lynched Pandit? Nobody knows what happened. That gentleman gave his life in protection of the interest of a mosque he was standing, and a mob lynched him. Question number 2. Question number 3, I would also like to know our two panelists, one Major General Astana and Rahul Jalalji. We've heard both of them. Now, Mr.
All right, my apologies to our panelists. We've completely run out of time, but of course this is a subject that we are going to discuss repeatedly in the coming weeks and months. How much of an impact is today's success of the security forces going to make on the ground in Kashmir is one of the questions we'll probably find the answer to. Well, with that, it's a wrap on the show. Thanks for watching.